Hello, my name is Linda Wasylciw, also known as L.M. Wasylciw and or Professor Scry, and I'm going to tell you a bit about why an author should not ease into a story. There's absolutely no benefit to beginning your novel when your characters are ordering takeaway from McDonald's if your story was intended to begin at the car crash. It doesn't matter to the reader that the driver of the vehicle swerved as he was taking a bite from his Big Mac, whereby causing the crash. What does matter is getting your reader's attention. And the key is to have them immediately immersed into the story, to feel the emotion, envision the crash, and to see the blood and gore. By avoiding the long, drawn-out description and build-up, you have taken the first step to creating an interest on page 1. If your reader feels the crash, then almost immediately an emotional bond has been built with the characters. That's not to say that there's no room for melodrama, for there is. But it's not at the beginning, not on page 1. Whenever I read a book that opens with a funeral or a hospital scene, I know that the author could have begun chapter 1 with much more impact, and I rarely begin reading a book without finishing it. So I do eventually get to that car crash, the funeral scene, a hospital scene, or whatever circumstances were to grow from the story. If those details are a part of the story, then they are important. But page 1 is not the best place to express them. Consider this. If the author introduces the protagonist by explaining in long-drawn detail about how abusive her childhood was and all the awful things that she had to endure, the story is sluggish, dragging along much too slowly. As interesting as waiting for window service from McDonald's. In the same way that if the story begins with a funeral, when the reader has not been allowed the time to get to know the dearly departed, therefore, a death has less impact. Your readers must become emotionally involved, so set the scene. Then, and only then, have your characters clinging to life. Some authors will begin a novel with a lot of storytelling and or flashbacks in an effort to explain why a character is a certain way. You know what? We don't care. Readers don't care. That's the formula for non-fiction books, not for fiction. Don't get me wrong. Your character's merits and quirks are important, and there is no doubt that your reader wants to know the character in full detail and completely understand what they're all about. However, the best way is to begin by tossing them into a problem. There's plenty of time later on in the book to divulge that the character was abused or abandoned or whatever their horrible circumstances were. Introduce your character in a challenging situation, and if it's fitting, mention a few of the eccentric qualities of the person at that time, but only when they're clinging to life. Think of it this way. Chapter 1 opens with your character Dick looking at the placid river as it flows on by. His coffee cup is growing cold on the table beside him, ignored. It is the perfect summer day, and he's sitting there thinking about the Sunday afternoon drive and the picnic that he and Jane had planned, a celebration of their 5th wedding anniversary. His thoughts were interrupted by the sounds of singing, and he smiled, knowing that it was Jane, joyful and content as she filled the picnic basket. Now, instead, let's begin where the floodwaters are already up to the eaves. Dick frantically looked around for Jane, but she was nowhere in sight. He clung to the tree, watching the raging river rise. The floodwaters were up to the eaves of the house, and he hoped and prayed that Jane had escaped. Terrified, he called out to her, but there was no reply, and he was certain that she was gone forever. Just minutes before, he was lazily enjoying the view, the placid river, while he sipped his morning coffee. Unchecked tears flowed down his cheeks, blending with the muddied river water. He realized then that the hydro dam must have burst, for what else could have caused such a disaster without warning? The day had been so perfectly planned, a picnic and a Sunday afternoon drive to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary. If your story truly starts on page 50, then delete the first 49 pages. It's most important to get to the point as quickly as possible. Suck your reader in completely and fully. And remember that fiction is about one thing and one thing only: problems. And if your character's problems are bigger than your readers, then you've created something that's caught their attention. You know what? I bet you that they're already on chapter 2.